Hi, and welcome to Decoding AQ, helping you to learn the tools, mindsets, and actions to thrive in an ever-changing world. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our next episode of Decoding AQ. With me in his morning, my evening today, I have Peter Sursi. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So Peter is based in Virginia. He has been almost boy to man at the FBI, 25 years. So as an experienced HR exec, he's defining the future for organizations. And as a people and operations and change management expert, Peter's really a sought after international keynote speaker alongside his role at the FBI. He's the former head of talent acquisition. So he spent 4 years in that role. And who would want that kind of role, right? Managing the national recruitment and hiring strategy for FBI special agent, the intelligence analysts and the professional staff employees must be really interesting and exciting. But he now is the head of finance modernization, dealing with a lot of things around relocation services. And so still very much HR involved and solving people challenges, leadership talent challenges in that world. And where I'd like to start us off, Peter, is what was the process for winning the Outstanding Leader Award in 2021 for the award you won, which was a recognition of your leadership where you transformed the FBI's hiring strategy, increasing the diversity and just bringing some great diverse talent into the FBI. What was that process for that award?
Yeah, great question. It's actually sort of a surprise. I'd been, as you said, the head of talent acquisition from 2016 to early 2021. And as you referenced, amazing job, like very difficult, some pretty significant challenges. The FBI, because everybody requires a top secret clearance, we have sort of a 2/3 fallout rate in our background investigation process. So for every open rec, we have to have 3 people that say yes to an offer, and then 12 to 15 months later, they make it through the background process. So we have to, and two of the 3 have fallen out. And so, there's all kinds of issues with like trying to forecast attrition and keeping candidates engaged while they're in the application process, making sure that diverse candidates make it through. So, really awesome challenges to tackle. And then in 2021, there was one of those sort of inevitable executive leadership musical chair type exercises. And so they asked me to come over here to our finance org and take over this role that had never had a full-time executive. And it's 180 people in 15 locations around the country. And so what they really needed was HR help. They didn't say it that, but that's really what they needed. So I've just come over to finance, and then my old boss basically put me in for this award from my time in HR, really focused on the work we did, not just transforming the special agent hiring experience, which we, sort of stripped it down to studs, overhauled the application, did a bunch of new assessments, overhauled the interview process, created, the first ever FBI national recruitment plan with diversity and overall, numerical target goals, but then also transformed our professional staff hiring. That's like our other category that, from soup to nuts. Basically, if you're not an agent or an intel analyst, you're professional staff, where we focus on specialty hiring for lawyers, forensic accountants, linguists, computer scientists, data analysts, a lot of technical specialties that had low fill rates. And we sort of set up, in the Bureau, we use the term tiger team. We set up tiger teams, what you would say a cross-functional team for each of the groups to focus on driving, change in the hiring process across all the business partners, for each of the associated groups. And then we met to track our progress. So, I was actually surprised to get the award because I was no longer in the thick of HR when, in classic Bureau way, I get an email saying, "Oh, you've gotten an award," and then no other information about it for several months. But it was actually really nice to be acknowledged that way, for sure.
It's interesting, isn't it, when for a lot of people, we see the outside view of organizations and entities, right? We will see it through the media, through the coverage, and it's very hard to know what goes on behind the scenes unless we've been involved in it. And for lots of organizations, they are carefully controlling the media. They're looking and really looking at that narrative, especially around HR. What's the employee brand? How do we make sure we're attracting the right talent, retaining talent? And then when you say the headline of FBI and you've got this entire genre of a lot of people's experiences via movies and series and all of these things of what they might perceive. So I'm interested in, you mentioned a couple of things there, the journeys that different people have in the FBI. So your own journey, you mentioned linguistics and things like that. And there's various other areas that we might not even realize because we just think, people who dress in black and wear shades. Tell us a little bit about your own journey through the FBI over the 25 years. How did you get involved and what were some of the interesting parts?
Yeah, I mean, I used to say, and I still say that, the FBI has 400 jobs and the special agent is one. And there's those 399 other things that people do at the FBI. And though it's the FBI, it's also still a medium-sized organization of 39,000 people with a footprint, of 70 offices, around the country and everything that organizations like that need, right? And so, the vast of our 39,000 people, only about 15 to 16,000 are special agents. And so, there's quite a lot of the everything else bucket. And that's how I started. I started as a Japanese translator for the Bureau. I had been teaching English in Japan for a couple of years, came back to the States, taught Japanese in Fairfax County Public Schools, which is our local school system here. They have a bilingual education program at middle school. And so taught that for a year. Saw an ad on the internet, the FBI needs linguists, which I never thought about, of course. And so I was like, sure, that sounds cool. So I'm definitely not one of those people that grew up like, I want to be in the FBI someday. Like, that is not my story. I wanted to use Japanese. And so I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, which for your international listeners is in the Midwest of the United States. I was had a very super boring childhood, and the FBI kind of likes those boring cases because that makes you very easy to clear through the top secret background process. So yeah, started as a Japanese translator, worked that for a couple of years, super interesting work. The way the language work in the FBI functions is you get the linguists where you can find them, and then you move the work around to the linguists to take on different tasks. And then I was a linguist during 9/11. That was a really crazy experience and sort of transformed, as you might imagine, the way the Bureau handled foreign language requests with the rise of counterterrorism investigations. So I was lucky enough to become a supervisor right after that. So my first supervisory role ever was as a supervisor of linguists, and did that for a couple of years. This was in our Washington, D.C. Non-headquarters, but our Washington, D.C. office. Then in 2004, I moved to the FBI headquarters entity where I started to work in the National Foreign Language Program. So there I had a third of the language portfolio for the country. So if you think about 600 full-time linguists, 800 contract, contingency workers, I had a third of that portfolio. So Slavic languages, African, Indian subcontinent languages, non-Romance European languages, and wherever the language work popped up around the country, if they didn't have a resource locally, which most of the time they didn't, they would call me, and then I would, load smooth and move work all around the country. It's basically kind of a staffing function. We didn't really think of it that way, but like staffing language needs that would come up around the country. Awesome work. I got to work with all 56 field offices, all the different FBI internal orgs, counterterrorism, counterintel, cyber, criminal division. So really got an amazing look at the really breadth of FBI work. And then, because I've been in education before and because I'm a people person, every time they needed, HR needed a consult on, hey, we're doing this new position description for linguists. We need a linguist expert to help us out. I got volunteered for a lot of those roles. I really loved it. And so then the opportunity came to lateral across to take over the part of the org that did the national hiring for all the foreign language program components nationally. And so that was sort of like most HR people, we sort of like wander our way into it because we're, I think, loud and we are very opinionated. And I think that's my story for sure. So did that for a couple of years, and then was lucky enough to get my boss's job when he retired. And that's how I became the head of talent acquisition for the Bureau in 2016. Again, great job, crazy, role there. You talk about, trying to explore people's ideas of the organization from a branding point of view. And that's definitely something we talked about a lot. And I think back to where we were in 2016 when I started and where the FBI is today. And I just think the FBI has come so far, right? In 2016, we had no social media presence at all. We had no national recruiting strategy. We had no advertising strategy. Nothing centralized. It was all 56 offices sort of doing their own thing. And now, we have a national media strategy, a national advertising strategy, recruitment goals. Now we have a chief diversity officer, which didn't exist in 2016 when I started. So it's been super exciting to be part of that growth and journey along the way. But yeah, we've had to really tackle how people think about the FBI and what that means for the message that we want to send out as we're looking at bringing people to the organization.
What were some of the drivers of that, Peter? Because we often have this balance between internal and external drivers. Between internally, the organization saying it's not meeting what we need. We have this amount of people applying, 12,000 a year. We need it to be 30,000. We need to do this. We need to do these pieces. So we're going to initiate some new things, some new ways of doing it, social media or other processes in the strategy. Or was it externally being put pressure of, hey, you need to be more diverse. Hey, you need to be more inclusive in the way that you're dealing with the hiring strategy and acquisition? Or was it a combination of those? What were some of those drivers around going from regional pockets of best they can in different areas with, I'm sure, a variety of successes to try and bring this national approach? What was some of that transition?
Yeah, great question. And I think, like always, it's a mix of both. We, casting back to 2016, we'd certainly had several current and former executives of the FBI who were minorities, raising the flag within the organization saying, hey, we're not doing enough to bring more minority and female special agents into the organization, and we need to do something about that. And so they were, creating pressure externally, but also there was a growing, awareness in the FBI that was a significant thing we needed to really think about. At the time, our director was James Comey. We had a new CHRO that had just started, and I came into HR, that talent acquisition role right after. And sort of the remit from Director Comey at the time was like, hey, my boss, the new CHRO, I need you to think about increasing the diversity of special agent ranks. So run some data and tell me where we are. Basically, is it really that bad? That was his first question, which is, is you're the new director and you're the new CHRO. That's the fair question. And the story that my former boss, the CHRO, would tell, which is a true story, is, he went into his first meeting with all of us and in terms of our data people, and he said, okay, well, we have a classic Quantico right now that's getting ready to graduate, I don't know, next week. That's the FBI. Quantico is the FBI Academy for all new special agents. They go and they spend, a couple months down there training to become special agents. He said, well, what's the diversity of the current class? Like, just give me a, quick and dirty look at the current class. And the answer was, well, we'll know on Thursday. And he said, well, why Thursday? He said, well, because we'll take the class picture on Wednesday, and then we'll be able to know what the diversity of the class is because we'll send you the picture. Which just sort of shows you where we were back in 2016, which is we had no data and we had no way to access that. We had no plan. We didn't have any goals. And so that was really the first part, is to put a structure in place so that we could even answer our own questions, like how bad is the situation? What do we need to do? And, that's when we realized that it wasn't just a diversity issue, which we knew there was a diversity issue, but there was also a raw numbers issue. And, going back to, I think, where we talked about branding and sort of how the organization views itself, this was definitely a big, I think, push-pull, because for a long time, the FBI viewed itself, and to some extent still views itself, as, an employer of choice. Like, we have a great reputation, people should want to come to work for us. And there was definitely a feeling like we don't woo people, people come to us. And so we don't really need, I say ironically, to worry about our applicant experience or, how many people apply or fall out, because like if you don't stick with us, then it shows you don't have enough grit or determination, or, you didn't want it that badly, and all kinds of like, as an HR executive, you hear those things and you just are going crazy because that's just irrational. But I mean, that was sort of how the FBI thought of itself. I mean, to be fair, and it kind of had been that way for a long time. And so we really had to have these conversations internally about like, well, how is the external labor market changing, and how is the view of the need for diversity changing in organizations? And this was before Me Too, and before some of the other, more more modern, reckoning about, diversity in organizations that we've seen in the last couple of years. This was just before that, but still, we really had to think about, we have to respond to how the world is today, which means we have to create a social media presence. We have to create a great employee experience and a great applicant experience. We have to think of those things because everybody else is thinking about those things. And it's just not the same world that, you as a very senior executive of the FBI who entered the organization 20 years ago, it's just totally different now. So we have to let what the reality is on the ground is today, guide our journey. And, I think the FBI did really take that lesson to heart, and we really have made amazing strides. But like, it was definitely a very difficult couple of years. And there was, a lot of pushback internally about like, is it hand holding, or is it helping people, get through through the experience? And is one bad and is one good? So, pretty significant challenges.
It's interesting, isn't it, when we realize we want to change something, but yet we don't want to change certain pieces, right? This what we have in part of our model of unlearning, that certain processes are built in place to say, no, we got to make it hard. The cattle grid's got to be deep and wide, and they've got to make sure that they prove and show, versus no, maybe we can nurture, maybe we can help. And I can imagine some friction around those, not only process things, but the philosophy around that approach.
And they were very fair questions too, because I mean, becoming an FBI agent is it is a very hard job. It's a very difficult job with huge responsibility and tremendous pressure. So you want the people that get through the process to be, physically fit, psychologically fit. You want it. So it's not that their core idea of like, we want people to be dedicated to the idea of becoming an agent, because it's not just a random job you pick because you're bored with your other job. But at the same time, we also do have to, acknowledge like they do have other things competing for their attention, right? Especially if you wanted to bring in tech talent for computer scientists, or more new agents who have technology backgrounds. And we do want to bring in highly desirable, diverse candidates who, everybody is wooing these days, right? And trying to bring in to their own organizations. We have to create an employee value. I mean, I would say an employee value proposition. The FBI didn't say that, but like I would say that we have to create an EVP that makes sense to people. And we have one. I just don't think the Bureau ever really thought about articulating it in that way. But, once we were able to pull together this idea, like, look, you are going to protect the American people and uphold the Constitution. And that is real. That is not just some writing that we put on a wall somewhere. That is a real thing. And it is amazing work that you will not be able to do anywhere else. You can help people and help your communities. And if you came from a community that gave to you, and you want to give back to your community in some way, however you define your community, man, this is an amazing way to do that. And so, we were very easily able to create an EVP for them.
That authentic message that can resonate emotionally with the right people of,
that's right.
A purpose-driven organization. We talk about that a lot, now, of where people are migrating and moving, and where is the power shift between the employer and employee. And also now this landscape around dealing with employee mobility, and how we shift that talent might not be external, but it's internal, but in a room that it didn't realize would be better off put in a different area or role. In your experience, obviously, you've had your own journey from linguistics through to supervisory in different areas. How much of a case of, organizations and the future and the pace of things is between brand new, fresh in, versus mobility from within to be able to build, transfer, and evolve for the organization's needs of tomorrow. What's the kind of structure around that in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the conversation that organizations and their talent partners are having right now. I mean, you're always going to want to bring in new talent at all levels, because that, keeps fresh ideas coming in to the organization, and everybody needs that. At the same time, if you're going to invest in people, then it only makes sense to invest in people and then let them grow. And that means internal movement, and not just internal movement up the chain, but lateraling around to try new things. And I think in a lot of ways, we're still dealing with the legacy of some, 1950s, 1960s, how business org units were sort of laid out. Like, I'm going to come in at the finance level and I'm going to work my way up and I'm going to be a finance person my whole career. And I just don't think the world works that way right now. And I think organizations are still struggling to deal with that in a way. I think as opposed to hard barriers, there are a lot of soft barriers. So, my own journey, obviously I started, as a translator. I moved into operations, then I moved into HR, then I moved into finance. And before the Bureau, I'd been in education, right? And so I feel like I've been able to move. And some of those moves I was excited about and I planned. And some of those moves were unexpected, like my recent move, and honestly quite terrifying, and a little bit of imposter syndrome. But, the reality is, if we can focus ourselves and focus our teams on, let's even say you were going to stay in finance your whole career. Let's even say that. That whatever you're doing in finance right now, in 5 years, it's going to be different. You're going to be using a new IT system. There's going to be a new process in place. New tools are going to exist. And so you're going to have to grow and adapt and evolve. And if you are confident in your ability to learn new things, which I think we should all be, and we have a proven track record of being able to learn new things and then apply those skills, then really, it doesn't matter if we stay in finance or go to HR, because, I'm confident that I can learn something new. I'm confident that my core skills of I can talk to people, I can figure things out, I can ask questions. I'm not scared to stay in a room full of people that I don't know what you're talking about. And could you explain it to me? Like those core skills that have to do with your interpersonal ability, your ability to communicate with others, be authentic, show empathy to others, those human skills. If those are solid and you can acquire new information, then I think you'll be fine. And I think that's what organizations are trying to inculcate right now, is this internal talent mobility structure where they tear down, let's say, structural barriers that have been in place by policy or practice, where we only let these people in this role apply to this job. And the federal government of the United States definitely has some of those structural barriers in place that, even the FBI does not have a say over. And so, within what we can control, we try to allow for as much flexibility as possible. And I think that's really what every organization is trying to do now, is look at their internal process and say, hey, where have we put things in place that might have made sense 20 years ago to try to keep my talent with me, and I don't want people to leave. But I just think that that's very short-sighted and not practical now, because people are going to want to grow, they want to evolve. And they're going to leave. So the best you can hope for is you invest in them, and then when they leave, they think you're amazing because you helped them on that journey. And then as they fly away, what I always tell my team is tie a golden thread to their leg on the way as they fly out the door. So that if you ever need a favor, you could pull on it, and they think so highly of you and how much you help them, they'll come rushing back to help you. And sometimes that means they'll boomerang back to your company. Sometimes that means they'll refer somebody to you. But that's really what we can hope for right now.
Yeah, I think it is a real challenge, isn't it? Where when the stakes are high, when we're under pressure, whatever that might be in someone's environment, whether it's because of the mandate that the organization operates in, or because of the status of the particular situation, when those stakes are high, it's potentially harder to go and learn something. I don't know the answers, or I'll transition across to here and I'll figure it out. And I think we've got this sort of, perfect storm of where the uncertainty and unpredictability is becoming more pervasive in every area. The speed of things is accelerating, and therefore what I had experience in, I know the answer, I've got the knowledge, now is, hey, I don't know. I've got to run a few questions. I've got to have a few experiments. I don't know what data we need or what is there. This speed of learning and the safety, communication, trust, all of those things to allow some failure, to allow some learning of those. What I'm really fascinated by that I think would be interesting is we might be able to conceptually understand that. We think, okay, we can do it. How do organizations that might be challenged around communication, secrecy, lines of what is allowed to be done, not done, can we really embrace learning and change when it's at high stakes? What's your sort of response or thinking around that sort of subject?
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, the stakes are so high right now. Part of taking a risk is trying somebody new that, well, on paper, maybe they have adaptive skills, but they don't have, 5 to 10 years of experience in that very particular industry, right? And we see that in job postings all the time, right? Like, more and more unreasonable job postings, an entry-level role with 5 years of experience already. I was like, dude, that's not an entry-level role, right? Or I only want somebody who already has experience in an industry that I'm in, notwithstanding the case that that industry is evolving so rapidly. 10 years of experience in that industry may or may not have any utility today, right? So, but I think everybody's they're afraid, right? They're afraid of if they make a mistake, then money is going to get cost, and then they're going to lose their job, and they're going to get yelled at, and then the world is going to fall apart, right? Because people have got a mortgage to pay, and they've got food they want to put on the table, and like fundamentally, it comes down to that. And so I think that's where the rise of this discussion about psychological safety in organizations has come in, and really, if you're a leader of an organization and you're trying to, even let's say you have no altruism at all. Let's say I'm from a pure Machiavellian point of view, trying to eke every iota of energy or work out of my staff for the lowest possible price. Let's even say that's the case. You are still going to benefit from providing an environment in which people feel like it's okay to make mistakes, because no matter what environment you have, people are people and mistakes will be made. Like there's some part of the multiverse maybe where people do not make mistakes, but alas, that is not the part of the multiverse we live in. And where we live, people are going to make mistakes. So you might as well create this environment with the organization to say, hey, we are all people. I know you're going to make mistakes. It happens. Sometimes they're going to be costly. Would we like to try to prevent that? Yes, we would. Is the most important thing that we talk about our mistakes and we learn about our mistakes and we try to not make those mistakes again? That is way more important. So like I, as the leader of the organization, let me tell you about a mistake I made. Let me tell you where I totally screwed up. Let me not bite somebody's head off when they make a mistake. And you have to publicly model that kind of behavior. And so when you model that, look, it's okay to take a little bit of a risk, and we know mistakes are going to happen, because only by taking those risks are we going to be able to grow and evolve and push the envelope. And there's so much benefit to be had by pushing the envelope that usually the cost of those mistakes, it will all work out in the wash. And if you model that and signal that at the higher end of the organization, that will trickle down, because then you're going to ask your leaders, hey, have you considered new people? Hey, what are you doing to push the envelope? Hey, you haven't failed at anything. Does that mean that you're pushing the envelope hard enough, right? You're going to start to ask questions like that. And, when you see your leader accept a mistake from somebody and turn it into a growing and teaching experience, that means it's okay for you to do the same. And the more you have that psychological safety, that you're in an environment where it's going to be okay, then people are going to want to take more risks, and it's going to be okay to try that person that maybe, was in sales, but they really want to go be in some part of the, HR business partner role or something like that, right? It'll be okay, because you're like, okay, it's a little bit of a risk, but I can take that because I feel like the potential reward is worth the risk.
And that kind of modeling, so we model the behaviors that we want to see, and we go, okay, there is now a world in which the hit rate of failures or experimentation is going to be higher. So we want to foster that, because not only realizing it's going to happen because we're doing new things in new ways, but also it's a way to drive innovation. It's a way to make change happen, right? To go from one system to another system. As we expand that out from modeling that it's okay to actually the reward structuring social contracts of employment aren't really orientated around that. They're orientated around the outcome, the result, hitting target, not making mistakes, getting the end piece, not the activity, not, oh, you turned up every day or you did a really good job. No, did you hit this that is the KPI, the OKR, the whatever it is that's there? In the same realm, do you envisage a future for organizations where the link of the promotions, benefits, all of those things could be around the reverse of how many failures did you have? How many bits did you learn? Could we go that far, or is that taking it too much?
I mean, as an HR person who is totally on the bandwagon of the internal mobility train, right? Like I'm on that train. I mean, I literally am on that train. And of course I believe in that. I would love to think that we can get there, but you know, and we might be able to, but it's hard for sure. I think what's more reasonable is to say, hey, when you're doing your, you know, when you're setting your KPIs, you're setting your goals for the year, whatever it is, fundamentally, did you make your piece of the pie, your part of the organization better than it was a year ago? And better, I think traditionally has mean, as it, you know, it often means, have you generated more income? Have you generated more business lines? You know, is the book of business bigger? And I do think we have to expand that because there are very important parts of the organization that might not be generating business. And it doesn't mean that they don't need to evolve. It doesn't mean they don't need to grow. It doesn't mean they're not important. So the question really is like, how have you evolved, you know, your own process procedure in the last year, right? When was the last time we changed this? Like, I think those are the questions that we should be asking. And then when you, through whatever, you know, award structure you have in your organization, you know, it's, you just can't award, you know, the same top salespeople are going to be the same every single year. And I'm not saying we should not reward them because of course, you know, they need to be rewarded because they're driving your business forward. But I think there is a place to reward those people that are pushing the envelope a lot. And, you know,
a
it's
reward
okay.
for learning.
Yeah, yeah. Or for, hey, you've significantly evolved the business practice and you've, you know, created a new opportunity for a new line of business, or you have saved time and money so your staff can do additional things, or, you know, you've, you know, nurtured, you know, 15 great leaders out of your organization that have gone on to do new things. And I think those are the kinds of things we should recognize in leadership, you know, as opposed to just, did you hit your KPI? Did you hit your OKR? You know, what is it, you know, that you're doing? And, you know, I think some organizations are able to do that. You know, that's definitely a little far from where we are right now. But I do think that, you know, organizations will have to go there to maybe not to survive, but really to thrive and really continue, you know, going back to sort of your point of evolving and adapting to change. Because if they don't, then I think they're just going to be stuck in, we're going to have people come in, we're going to churn and burn them out. And, you know, at some point, you can only make so much forward momentum that way, you know, because you're losing all your institutional knowledge, you're having to train new people coming in, there's just so much lost, you know, productivity with the churn and burn that I do think you're going to have to figure that out.
I want to change tack a little bit, Peter, around, I'd love to get your thoughts and insights on, as we modernize any given area. So at the moment you're in finance and looking at it from a case and structural, dealing with people, and talent is often viewed of as human. We're entering a world where a lot of talent, a lot of productivity is now evolving into other ways. So we had these tools, software, other pieces that now we might even have these levels of intelligence in software that can do and perform certain tasks of elements of roles. And so where, for example, you know, take programmers and coders, we have 30 million of them employed worldwide currently. And I was speaking to somebody a few weeks ago around now how things like AlphaCode and other AI systems outperform the top coders. So we can just interface it in the same way Peter might say, hey, I need an app for doing this, or I need a system that does this. And then a coder goes and creates that. We'd give the same level of brief and structure into a AI tool and it will create the code out. So in 3 to 5 years, maybe we won't have coders anymore and programmers, certainly probably less than 30 million, or they'll be just reorientated to be prompt engineers or something. So when we think about the evolution of the future of work, of talent. What do you see as part of the, I now have to engage and interact with this talent that is a software entity, that I'm having a conversation with an avatar that is got all the best analysis work, and I can say, hey, can you give me the diversity of the, and you're speaking to a AI and it gives you the answer. What's your view about how that's going to affect the future, and maybe how you're thinking about that from a modernization way within perhaps your role of where does software and talent maybe merge in the future?
Oh man, that is the conversation, of course, of the next, 5 years for sure in HR. And so when I talk to my external peers in HR, this is the conversation we're having. Are we calling them bots? Are we calling them virtual employees? What does that mean for our existing employees? Things like that. On the very immediate end, right? The FBI has, let's say, a very, very complicated feeling and rules about IT security. And so we are starting to have this conversation within the FBI about, can we use robotic process automation to write, bots to do some very repetitive tasks. And the Bureau is actually just setting up right now a center of excellence for robotic process automation in conjunction with our CIO's office to try to do that. And we are actually, one of my team's going to be one of their first guinea pig projects to do some financial obligation, basically monthly adjustments that takes a lot of work for a lot of people to do right now. And so we're not quite there yet, but we're really excited to be a guinea pig for one of those projects. I think the conversation to be had is, what are people good at, right? People are fundamentally good at making relationships and that empathy with one another. And so I think just like I'm in finance right now, and of course, finance as an industry is ripe for automation because there's a million repetitive tasks. And so, as I talk to my own team right now, I'm like, look, the future is going to be more automated. For us, we're at the FBI. I don't know what that means for us. It might be a longer conversation for us than maybe for private sector because of our rules, but the train is only moving in one direction. So we just have to think about what does that story mean for you as employees when the time comes? The reality is we have lots of work to do. And so your work might change, but I just don't see us losing you. It's, we're a little different than the private sector, especially because everybody here is top secret cleared, and it's such a huge effort to get top secret cleared people to just let them go because they don't have anything to do right now. That's just such a waste of a clearance. And so for us, we have this huge incentive to retain people who want to stay and keep them because they're cleared, and that's a really difficult, person to acquire. And so again, I always talk to people about evolving and say, look, humans are always going to want that human interaction. And I'm not saying our chatbots aren't getting better and better. The last time I went on Expedia and I made travel reservations and I worked with a little AI chatbot, it was a great experience. And of course, that's still going to be great. But you and I both know that there are times when you just want somebody on the phone. You want to feel like I'm talking to a literal human being because I have tons of anxiety about this process. And I think, in business, we've been talking a lot about process and we're talking a lot about what we need to do, but we don't talk very often about the emotionality of the interactions we have with our customers. And in HR, that is a huge part of our role, is that emotional labor that we do when we interact with people because they're angry or they're anxious or they're excited or, whatever. And we have to get through that emotionality and then do the actual task. And I think that's really the role for human capital versus, let's say, virtual employees, is to focus on the emotionality of that, those tasks and those roles. How do I help manage excitement, and how do I help manage anxiety, and how do I help manage, nervous people that are trying to go through a career change, or I'm talking to a new customer and they just want somebody sitting in the chair next to them telling them, we've been through this before, it's going to be okay. I know you're a new client for us, but we have tons of experience with other people, we got this. And I think dealing with that emotionality is really going to be the core of what we're going to be asking employees to do in the future. I think we see that in all the, emotional intelligence is our biggest, business asset right now. And so to me, that is just the natural inevitability of where we're headed. And then that will allow the virtual employees, the bots, AI, to do a lot of the other things that, just take time for us to do right now. And that's really, I think, what we'll lose are these things that just take our time, but don't really deal with the emotionality of people.
That maybe are humans behaving as robots, and we can take that element out and go and give it to them.
That's right. That's right.
I think a couple of bits I want to share, Peter. So I've definitely got to connect you with a chap called Jason Slater, because he works at UNIDO, so one of the UN agencies, the Industrial Development Organization. And a few years ago, he was one of the first people that piloted some of our work when he was in the finance department. And some of the outcomes of the transition of change was a lot of robotic process automation, all of these things, by identifying what some of the barriers were, not necessarily process or technological, but human ones. What you just talked about of, I want to hold on to something I've had. How do I unlearn this? How do I go from a state of fear and anxiety to engaged flow and experimentation? And that's very human. And we need to understand those drivers. And is it a burning ambition? Is it a burning platform? And so I've got to connect you with him, because he's gone, interestingly, finance, IT, all sorts of areas in some similar areas of stuff. So I think that could be cool to
yeah, for sure.
And the other part, I think it's really interesting, isn't it, where we think about this balance between replacement versus augmentation. And 1 in 5 roles, 50% of their tasks are at risk for some form of automation or impact by large language models, or all of these things. Well, great, we shouldn't be doing some of those things anyway. And that opportunity then that it creates is space for learning, space for play, space for going from knowing and answers to experimentation and learning. And I think that for some with a particular mindset will be exciting. And you rightly said, for others, it's going to be holy and I'm fearful, I can't sleep, and all of these things are happening. So for you, as in your experience, in your more than life sentence at FBI of time, and you have these amazing people that have got through clearance, they have potential to do things that they can't even imagine today of how they might show value for themselves and society. What are you most excited about of the skills, the systems, the stuff, the things that people can do to help them realize there might be new things inside them that they never even knew were possible? I'd just be really interested in your thoughts of that, either philosophically or actual programs that are happening or your own experience.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be a certain percentage of the population that is willing to put themselves in new and uncomfortable positions on purpose to grow proactively, right? Every entrepreneur I've ever met puts themselves in that category, right? They know it's going to be uncomfortable, they know it's going to be terrible, but they're doing it because that they know they're going to grow, and they want that, they crave that on purpose, right? And then there's a giant middle group that's like, I guess we'll figure it out when time comes. And then there's another group that's like, I'm going to avoid being uncomfortable at all costs, right? And I think we don't have to worry about the front group, right? They're going to take care of themselves, right? They're ahead of you and I already. The middle group, and the group that's lagging, I think those are really where we can spend our time and effort. I think the best thing that we can do right now is try to, once you've created a psychologically safe environment where it's okay to fail and struggle, you can start to paint that story for them about where things might be going. And we in the Bureau, we do a lot of what I would call cross-functional, short-term internal assignments. Like, hey, I know you're in the finance org, but I have an opportunity over here for somebody. Would you be willing to go over there for 60 days because I have somebody on maternity leave, or I have somebody stepping out to do something else? And because it's like kind of like a try before you buy. I know it's going to be hard for you, but I also don't have tons of expectation for you in 60 days. I just need you to keep the train running. So there's lower stakes a little bit. And so I'm a huge believer in those opportunities. And I think, again, some people are raising their hand for them, and, we can definitely encourage that. And those are your future leaders and growers. But I think we should be assessing those people that are ready, but not asking. And that's where we have to go to people and be like, because that's that failure of imagination, that failure to imagine themselves in a new role barrier.
And they're invisible.
That's right.
They're invisible at the moment.
Yeah. And that's where we have to try to hold their hand and take them across the bridge. And I think we do that by telling our own stories of when we did that. And I think, people need to hear stories of people who look like them, right? So like, I'm a white guy, right? My story's not going to work for everybody, resonate for everybody, but they find people in the organization who look like them, who have been successful, although they have made mistakes, but they've been able to grow through those mistakes. They've been uncomfortable and they've, pushed past it. Like those stories that we tell our people serve as models to be like, okay, I am an African-American woman that's younger in the organization and I am in this lane, but I do see a model of somebody who is able to jump to a new part of the org. And they did make mistakes because they told me about it. And it was really difficult, but you know what? They got through it and they're in such a great place now. I can see myself doing that. And maybe they'll just be that a little bit more able to take a leap, especially if they have a sponsor kind of holding their hand saying, look, I believe in you. Like I did it. I see you. You absolutely can do this. I'm going to be there. We're going to help you. If you make a mistake, it's going to be okay. We'll help you pick up the pieces. It's going to be okay. And you know what? It's for short term. So, it's not a permanent change. I think the more we do things like that, that's really how we're going to help people, get where they need to be in the future.
And I think what you described is that shift from management and accountability to coaching and support. And so that transition really needs to have that, whether it is, like you say, stories, role models that they can relate to is one part. Another part is then a shift from management, these are the expectations, to go and learn out loud, go and experiment. And we can coach you through that. We can support you through that. And shifting from coaching being an elusive or an exec level or a privilege to being part of the organization's just heartbeat to allow this reskilling era that we're in, because traditionally it's been more upskilling, as you say, come in, we're going to be like this. But if we're looking at lateral and we're looking at areas that haven't been done before, that we can't say, have you got 5 years experience in prompt engineering with this? Well, no, because it was only just released, X amount ago. So we need coaching, we need that support around it. So as we come to a close, I've got two final bits for you, Peter, because it's just flown by, but I want to cover a couple of other bits. One is, if somebody is in an organization that's leading a team that is perhaps struggling through a transition, a change, and you've been part of that through lots of different areas of whether it's relocation change, strategy change, all of these pieces. What would be some of the maybe tips or people could take on if they're leading a team through a period of change that wasn't desired, it was brought on them by an external thing, an external source? What would you advise? And then I've got one final question after that. So I'll let you give a quick thought on there.
Yeah, two quick thoughts. One is we hate change at work, but the world outside of work changes all around us, and we adapt much more quickly to that because it's very convenient to use an app on my phone to schedule my doctor appointment, whatever. And so I really just try to pivot to look, there are all these things in your outside world that are changing, and somehow we're managing to adapt there. And so we can do the same here. And so that makes it seem a little less catastrophic, like change is coming. I really try to pitch it in terms of the world is evolving around us and we need to continue to evolve. And we'll always do that. And the second thing is, I think it's really important to acknowledge people's feelings about their discomfort and that it's okay. Like, hey, I'm sure you're feeling a lot of anxiety. It's okay. I totally validate that feeling. Let's talk about why you're feeling that. Let's talk about how, it's very normal to be feeling that. And let's talk about how we can get through that together, and to just make them feel like this discomfort, while we will have to get through it, we will get through it together, but it's also very normal and it's okay. It's not some kind of shameful feeling. It's not some kind of you're inadequate because everybody's supposed to be rah, change. And man, I'm dreading it. It's okay to be feeling those things. And I think you just have to acknowledge that and acknowledge maybe your own anxiety or uncertainty as a leader, but just be well, I'm feeling a little uncertain too, but you know what I'm confident in? I'm confident in your ability to learn new things because you've shown me that. I'm confident in our ability to adapt because we've adapted already. And so when I think of that, my anxiety lessens. And so we'll get through it together. So that's kind of how I would anchor your teams, with some practical advice.
It's really helpful, isn't it? Because when we're in a stress state, we're cognitively impaired. When we're in that position of I'm fearful, I'm in each of these things, our physiology makes us less capable of actually implementing that change. So if we can shift that on a neuroscience basis, on connecting via, hey, here's some other scenarios, here's some other pieces in your world where you are able to. This is happening. That's okay. We've got you. Let's work on that. Let's discuss it, rather than it shouldn't be talked about. It's going to be pushed over here. Or even if you do raise it and it's safe, nothing blooming happens. We need some of those systems in place. So I really think that's so helpful for people to encourage those conversations which are sometimes hard and tough, and do them without judgment, if we're in that role.
Well, I mean, it's reality, so we might as well just acknowledge the reality that actually exists, right? Instead of the world we wish were the case.
Yeah, it's perfect. My last piece as we wrap up is around curiosity, Peter, and it's a question I ask all of the guests, and it's around a lot of the subjects we've been talking about, learning new things, being playful, going and trying out a different role for 60 days, whatever it is. And it's related to, when was the last time you did something for the first time, and what was it?
Oh, I have a great answer. So my youngest just went off to college this past fall. And so my wife and I, in our empty nest, our stagnation is our biggest fear. And so we're like, nope, we're going to grow, we're going to evolve, we're going to do things. So we signed up to take French at the local community college. And so we're both now in French 101. We took French 101 and now we're in French 102. Just because, right? So, I mean, we both speak, like, my wife's Spanish is good. My Spanish is okay. I have Japanese. So, it's not like we've never learned a language before. We do not know French. We're like, oh, maybe we'll go to Paris next year. And we actually just had a disastrous French test last night. We both, we're both taking it separately. And afterwards, she's like, I need a glass of wine and I need to blow some things up on Mass Effect to get rid of this. I'm like, okay. So you can do it, right? It's going to be fine, right? So, yeah, it's fun.
I love it. The evolution now of work being a place of learning, not just, we go get educated, then we deploy that knowledge and we just tap it at the sides. Actually embracing learning throughout life is, I think, the new reality you talked about.
Yeah. You can just embroider that on a cushion and put it on every chair at work, everywhere.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
That's wonderful. As we close off, is there anything else that you would have liked to have shared, or you would have liked me to ask you before we close out, Peter?
No, I mean, I just encourage all your listeners to just, your people, they're trying, right? And everybody is anxious about it. And again, I just go back to, we're sort of trained really not to talk about emotions at work. And it's all literally, it's all business. It's not, but the reality is that's just not how people are, right? That's people bring their emotions with them everywhere they go. And you're just going to get a lot better results if you try to, meet your people on a human level and acknowledge where they are and tell them that that's normal, and then, go on that journey with them. I just think you're just going to get a much better result. And so, that would be my biggest piece of advice to people leaders, for sure.
I love it. Thank you, Peter. It's been an absolute pleasure. I know this one has been a long time in the making. I think we initially connected a year and a half ago to try and set this up. So I appreciate your continued diligence, and it's not disappointed. It's been absolutely brilliant to share conversation with you, learn about your own journey, and share some of your insights and advice with our audience. So a deep gratitude and thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's been really great.
Do you have the level of adaptability to survive and thrive the rapid changes ahead? Has your resilience got more comeback than a yo-yo? Do you have the ability to unlearn in order to reskill, upskill and break through? Find out today and uncover your adaptability profile and score, your AQ. Visit AQai.io to gain your personalized report across 15 scientifically validated dimensions of adaptability. For a limited time, enter code PODCAST65 for a complimentary AQME assessment. AQai, transforming the way people, teams, and organizations navigate change. Thank you for listening to this episode of Decoding AQ. Please make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast directory, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Please do leave a review and be sure to tune in next time for more insights from our amazing guests.